Got a question here from the Geek on Skates. Dear Sir Brian, Duke of Lund and Grand Liege of Linux, I noticed from your videos that you're not much of a fan of the modern web. I don't like JavaScript, give me C any day, but JavaScript makes the web less like documents and more like software. I know, doesn't it suck? Software that can even do video, audio, and games. And that's pretty cool. Wait, what? It's cross-platform, open, and did I say cross-platform? Sure, it's bloated, it can be slow, it's used in some shady ways to track users, and its scripting language is a mess. But it's definitely not all bad. But holy guacamole, do you ever seem to hate it? What's up with that? P.S. Still not an Arch user, though I admit I have dabbled. Smiley face. Well, the Geek on Skates... It's true. I make no secret about my disdain for not just JavaScript, but the language, the frameworks around it, and the way it is utilized. I dislike all of it. In fact, I dislike it so much, I had the inventor of JavaScript, Brendan Eich, on this show and told him right to his face how much I dislike it. I believe I even asked him something along the lines of if he ever feels remorse for the thing he has unleashed upon the world. And he gets it. He gets it. The reality is JavaScript isn't terrible. No language is terrible. Not really. There's good in every language, right? Like I'm not a huge fan of just regular Java, but there are some good things about Java. At least debatably, I kind of like the object-oriented dot syntax of Java. It's not too bad, and there's some good there. There's some real value there. The same with JavaScript. There is real value in the language of JavaScript, and there is value in having every web browser on planet Earth completely and utterly reliant on JavaScript. My real problem is that exactly what you say here. It makes the web less like documents and more like software. That's the problem. And yes, I recognize that having a good cross-platform solution for distributing applications is handy. I like that. That's what Java itself was supposed to accomplish. Write once, run anywhere. And JavaScript more or less accomplished that. The problem is the web before JavaScript was kind of awesome. It was kind of rad. And we're not just talking about the World Wide Web. We're talking about all of the hypertexty sort of systems that existed prior to that, like Gopher. Gopher was awesome. Early web HTML was awesome. Those were cool things. It was hypertext linked together documents throughout the world that you could link between for spreading information and poetry. You could spread poetry that way. I don't know why I come up with that example, but I did, and so I can't take it back because I'm not the kind of guy that edits his videos. But it was awesome. It made things fast. It made things light. It made it easy to make the web work on a wide variety of devices, operating systems, and connection types. Once we added a huge reliance on JavaScript, it took that away entirely. If you try to use the modern web from an old web browser, and we're talking old, we're only talking a couple years old, it is almost completely non-functional. Sure, you can go to amazing websites like Lunduke.com and they still work, but that's because I am one of 7 people that seem to care when actually putting together a website that it works on what I like to call web browsers. Because modern applications that browse the web are not web browsers. They are Java application container frameworks like Chrome or Firefox. They are built to host JavaScript applications. That's what they do. And in fact, they are all filled with closed source software to decode DRM video and whatnot. Well, not all of them, but many of them, all the big ones anyway, like Firefox and Chrome. And I just don't like that. That's not what I wanted, you know? And I get that I might be in the minority there. Okay, might might be a bit of a stretch. I am without a doubt in the minority there, but I still don't like it. I would be fine if we all said, here's the web over here. It is hyperlinked documents. We can put up new documents for blogs, for web pages with business information, for technical information, for whole books, if you will. And that's over here. There's no JavaScript in sight. It's just beautiful and fast loading and static. There's no dynamic web pages. When I load a web page, it loads and it's done. None of this little gray boxes where content will eventually appear as it is fetched dynamically using JavaScript queries to a JBoss backend or some crazy nonsense like that. It's just static. And it works on text-based browsers and browsers on old operating systems. You get to load up an old Amiga web browser, it works just fine. Load up a web browser on a modern Linux system, it works there too. And then over here, have this other thing. This, call it whatever you want. Call it Web 15.0. I don't care. I don't care what you call it, but keep it separate. And this thing over here is this JavaScripty application containerized framework of power that's filled with DRM codes to play back video so that Netflix and everyone else is happy. And dynamic assets all over the place. So after you finish loading a 17.5 gigabyte website, it then begins to fill in all the actual content because that 17 bajillion gigabytes was just the JavaScript framework, and grab some node things over here and some other JavaScript framework over there. Well, now you got your application up and running. And if they want to make that the cross-platform happy application framework that all modern operating systems can run, that's cool. I actually think that's rad. I might not dig it and use it a lot, but I think it's cool. It's a neat idea. But I don't like that they clobbered hypertext documents, which is a very compelling and valuable thing in order to make that happen. They did. It's clobbered. You don't get HTML documents anymore. You really, really don't. I mean, a couple websites out there are like that. Mine is like that. But you really don't get that anymore. If you want a website that looks modern, you need, I don't know, 1.21 gigabytes of JavaScript just to make it look modern. It's like everyone else expects. And again, there's value to that. There really is. But I don't want it in my web browser. I want it separate. Make it a completely different thing. We can have, you know what? Maybe people like me should all just go back to Gopher. We should all just get Gopher back up and running and make Gopher the de facto for folks like me who want hypertext connected and easily searchable and fast loading static documents that run and render well on an incredibly wide variety of both new and ancient hardware and operating systems. For us, let's just go back to Gopher. And then the rest of the people can have the web, which is, fine. And you know what? I'll even use the web sometimes. But I don't want the two to be the same thing, because inevitably that hypertext document sort of thing that we had that with Gopher and the early web is pretty much all gone. And that kind of sucks. That makes me sad. It's something that is really cool that we no longer have because web developers decide... I'm going to hear about this episode. Web developers decided we needed to have 87 bajillion petabytes of JavaScript frameworks to load every website. Go to CNN.com. This is my favorite example. CNN.com, just the data that comes down only for one page, one front web page, which isn't a long page. It's like one simple A4 sized web page. Go there. It's bigger than Doom. It's bigger than the video game Doom, which has a whole 3D rendering engine, network playability that works over multiple types of networks, tons of artificial intelligence, maps of all sorts, graphics all over the map. And that's just for one page of the news. Not all the details of the news, just the headlines. Just the headlines listed out with links. That web page has less data on it, in some cases, than my website, Lunduke.com. Lunduke.com is tiny. Go to Lunduke.com. Check out how big it is. It's a couple K with some pictures. And the picture is a couple K. It's dinky. To say it could fit on a floppy is a ridiculous under or overstatement. Math, hard. You could fit it on the tiniest floppy you can imagine. Couple K. That's all it is. It's fantastic. I have there's a machine behind me right there. That machine back there is an old Slate, an old laptop. It's got the TRS-80 Model 102. Inside of it is 23 kilobytes of usable RAM. So after you work out the operating system and all that, you have about 23K of RAM. I could fit my website in the RAM on that tiny little machine made in the year 1702 when dinosaurs roamed the earth. That's the beauty of HTML. And old HTML. I'm not talking HTML 4.785.3 dash crazy. I'm talking HTML Uno 1. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. We barely had blinking text. This is what I'm talking about. That was the time. And so JavaScript, it gets the brunt of a lot of my anger because it is the epitome of software that has become bloated, right? I dislike bloated software, and JavaScript is just the most amazing example of that. And so it gets a lot more of my wrath than it deserves because it has value. It absolutely has value as a mobile portable application framework for those sorts of applications. It's total has value. And a lot of people really enjoy coding in it. And I say more power to them. Let them have at it. I just am annoyed that bloat, that extraordinary bloat, has clobbered some of the things that I think were some of the greatest innovations of the 80s and 90s. And that sucks. That totally sucks. And yeah, so I hate it. I do. I hate JavaScript for that reason. I think that computing as a whole would be better off without JavaScript. Look at it like this. Your machine right now, what's your favorite piece of software on there? What's the piece of software that you think is the coolest? Is it written in JavaScript? Probably not. Because in order to write something great, you want good performance. You want to be accessing the bare metal hardware or at least some lower level system components. You want raw speed, and you don't use JavaScript for such ridiculous things. So many web-focused developers right now are writing me, but you don't know about the web ASM and the things. Here's the thing, guys. I know all about that. Been developing web applications. I was about to say since before most of you were in diapers, but A, I realized that was kind of a mean thing to say and kind of makes me sound like a jerk. It already came out of my mouth, so it's too late. And B, it's totally true, which just makes me feel really old. However, jeez, I was talking with a web developer guy the other day, fan of the show, and we were chatting. And he's, a young guy, and we started talking about when he started, in his first job. And his first job wasn't until, oh gosh, it was really recent. And I was thinking about that. I'm like, wow. And then I started talking about my first job. And my first job in the computer industry was working for Hewlett Packard back in the 90s. And that was my first computery job. And he kind of gets this look on his face like, all right, I was technically born. I was like, oh man, we are really coming from different eras. It's amazing how much how much the computing world has changed over the last several years. Over the last 10 to 15 years, it is just not the same place. It's not the same place from a technological standpoint, from a cultural standpoint. It is just not the same, for better or worse. And there's both good and bad in all of that. But one of the worst things that I think we've seen in all of that is the proliferation of bloated software. We used to criticize bloat. We used to criticize it a lot. A new operating system or a new Office suite would come out and it would be, a couple megabytes bigger, and we'd be like, whoa, bloated much? You guys ever think about optimizing your code? We dog on them. Now we're like, what? This Linux distribution takes 1.2 gigs? No big deal. Just for the operating system. What? Windows 10 takes up 30 gigs on your hard drive by default? Whatever it takes up. It's ridiculous. No big deal. Yeah, we'll, make fun of it for 3 seconds, but then we'll move on because we have such big hard drives. Who cares, right? It's like, well, it makes everything slower. It makes everything buggier. It does. The more code you have, the more bugs you have. That's just the way it works. Anyone who says otherwise has not been in software development long enough. That's how it works. Slim, lean, clean. That's one of the things that I loved about Gopher and early web and those sorts of hypertext systems, is that they were clean. They were simple-ish. They had some complexity to them, but they were, comparatively to what we have nowadays, a very, very simple systems. And because of that, they were reliable and consistent. At least they could be. And I feel like we've lost a lot of that. And JavaScript, the language itself, isn't necessarily at fault. It's the way we as a developer community have embraced the let's use JavaScript for everything that has clobbered the old web. It has encouraged bloat, and it is just not a great foundation from which to build a light, lean, fast, stable platform of the future. It's just not. You might as well take an operating system built for mobile devices, base it on something glorious like Linux, and then just make it a big Java container. That would be the most insane idea you could possibly have if you were trying to make a well-performant, stable system. Yeah, I love getting a little dig at Android every now and then. Anyway, so the geek on skates, that's my feeling on the matter. I know I'm in the minority. I know I am. Maybe it's my age. Maybe it's just the time I was alive. Maybe it's the combination of all of my experience as a developer, and then as I did a lot of dev management, and I ran a couple of engineering departments and whatnot over the years, and I just got sick of things like JavaScript, ECMAScript, really just the whole action script field, like all that stuff. I was just like, ugh, it's just a bloated mess. I don't want it. Get out of here with that stuff. Anyway, so good to hear that you're still not an Arch user. It's okay. We all dabble a little bit with Arch here and there. The important thing is that you don't stick with it. This episode of Lunduke makes every web developer mad and somehow still manages to infuriate Arch users is brought to you by Lulzbot. And they make amazing 3D printers, which you can hook up to your Linux machines. They focus on free and open source software over at Lulzbot. I remember when I first started talking with those guys. Fantastic. They were like, yeah, you know what? We were just chatting about, we would love to work together, and, they want to help sponsor the show because they were liking what I was doing. And I'm like, yeah, and I really want to help promote what they're doing because I love the work they're doing on the 3D printing side. And they were talking about how they were trying internally to focus on more standardized free software across the board internally. And I'm like, that's amazing. So I gave them my advice and some of my input. They're like, that's great. And then they started having sales where they gave some of the proceeds to the Free Software Foundation and started doing all this stuff. And I'm like, man, they are just really trying to win over every little bit of good feelings I have in my heart. I love those guys so much. I'm even the voice on their phone tree system. It's just ridiculous. Which, by the way, I'm the voice on several phone tree systems now in the tech world. If you're ever calling like a company that you think dabbles in makery stuff or Linux-y stuff or open sourcey stuff, and you're like, is that Lunduke? Yeah, it probably is. It's the weirdest thing. I who would have thought, when you're like a 10-year-old looking, what am I going to do when I grow up? Am I going to be a fireman, an astronaut? No. I think I want to be the voice on phone tree system for a lot of open source and open hardware specific companies. Just a random thing. Go over to lulspot.com. Check out their line of 3D printers. They're absolutely glorious. And then go over to lunduke.com. You can support the show there, buy shirts, just shirts. You can support the show on Patreon. There's links over there. There's also ways you can get a hold of me if you'd like to ask questions of this show. I love taking your guys' questions. It gives me a chance to ramble and infuriate web developers, because that's what I was put on this earth to do, at least today. You can also go over to my BBS at bbs.lunduke.com. Don't try hitting it from a web browser, though. That won't work. This is a BBS that you connect to via Telnet, and I highly recommend that you do not use the built-in, like Unixy, Linuxy Telnets that most operating system comes with. You need one that handles ANSI character codes and the like. So go over to lunduke.com. I've got some recommendations for great open source and otherwise software that you can use to connect to the Lunduke BBS, and you can talk to me there. It's all free to use. It's just for fun. It's just a good way for us to all hang out. And there's also links for ways you can watch or listen to the show over there. But the way I love the most is over here on Library. Go to library.com. I'm just at Lunduke. That's my channel name. You can pitch in some of your library coin. That's their own particular cryptocurrency there. There's also a web version at beta.lbry.tv, which is basically like going to a YouTube website, except all open sourcey and a little bit more feel-goody and decentralized, so you can feel good about it. It's like YouTube, but not evil. That's a good way to describe it. Like YouTube, libraries like that, but not completely and utterly evil down to its core. Anyway, that's a great way to watch the show. You can also catch my friends like Gardner the Linux Gamer, who you see on this channel from time to time as well over there. Anyway, that's all for today. I will see you guys later. I'll see you guys later. Hey, Brian, why don't you come up with a really great way to end a show that's like catchy, maybe a theme song? Nah, I'm good.